My name is Cynthia Becker, and our goal here with the reality series of CPS the Horror Stories is to reveal the truth of what CPS does and the damage that they cause families by ripping them apart. So tonight I have Kirsten. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I don't know what to say.
Okay. Go ahead and tell me about yourself, where you live, where you work, and just about.
I'm a registered nurse for L&M, which is Lawrence Memorial Hospital, and I live in Connecticut.
Okay. And how about how many children you have and a little bit about them? 5. Awesome.
Their ages are 9 to 4.
Okay. And how about when CPS first entered your life?
All right, so they've been in for a while. I mean, I've experienced being a foster child myself to having my children taken as a parent. So I've dealt with both sides of the spectrum on that.
Well, if you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about you first and start there. How old were you and what happened?
So I have a disabled mother who raised 10 of us perfectly fine by herself. She's been through a lot. So because of her disabilities, I got taken at the age of 16. I have dealt with 2 different DCFs. I dealt with the Connecticut one as an adult, and I dealt with the one in Florida as a child. So I got put in a group home, which is one of the most grossest experiences ever, especially for a young teenager. It got to the point, I know my story's kind of weird at this point, I ran away with 2 other girls. One was 15, and I think the other one was 14, so I was the oldest out of the group. And we ended up running from Florida all the way to Connecticut with the help of what people consider illegal immigrants.
Wow.
So yeah, that's crazy.
So when you were taken, did something happen? Who called CPS?
I'm not really sure who called. I just know that I had a boyfriend at the time and he didn't get along with my mother, so I think it had something to do with that, because they had that argument and then it was called.
Okay. And what were their reasons for taking you?
They didn't think that because of my mom's special needs that she was capable of parenting.
And when they took you, did they give your mom an opportunity to fight for you and try to get you back, or?
She never even saw me. They didn't give her the opportunities at all.
So no visits or anything?
No.
Wow.
My whole entire life was uprooted. I was thrown from a regular high school into a military school in Florida. It was crazy.
Wow. So tell me about this group home, just for the viewers that are not familiar.
So the type of group home I was in, a lot of the children there we were all teenagers. There's no one younger than the age of 14.
Okay.
And we went up to 17 or 18 until some of us pretty much aged out. A lot of the people that were in this group home had what the state would consider behavioral issues.
Okay.
It was very crowded. The staff was kind of like weird punishments, and it was crazy.
Did you experience any kind of trauma or anything?
I did from the running away, but not actually from being there, even though it felt more like a prison than an actual home.
Okay. And since you've been out, you get to have a relationship with your mom again?
Yes, I ran away to be with my mom again.
Okay. And how is that relationship now?
It was great. Actually, since then, my mom has dementia now, so it's kind of different, but
Sorry to hear that. So, wow. So being in the system as a child and then having your kids removed, or I'm not really sure yet. I have to hear your story. Um, I actually, my interview the other night was the same thing. She, as a child, was removed and then had her children removed. It's pretty crazy. So let's go ahead and talk about that. You have 5 children,
I do.
and did it start off at, how did CPS become involved in your life as an adult?
So, it actually started when my youngest was actually 6 months old. I separated from her father and started living with my mom again. My mom ended up going to the hospitals when her dementia first started. And I used to bring my child to see my mom in the hospital all the time with my sisters and brothers. And the hospital ended up calling because they had a concern that I was leaving my newborn with my special need mother. So a day later, they show up. They asked me, "Are you leaving your kid with your mom?" And I said, "No." I showed them the house, showed them my kid, and they left. That was back in 2011.
Okay.
In 2012 is when I had my second child. They didn't bother me then. It wasn't until I had my third child, back in 2014, that they really got involved.
What happened?
I lived in Groton, and it was the holidays. It was Easter. So I took my children to go see one of my dearest friends in Norwich, and then I ended up going into labor. So instead of going all the way back to Groton, I went to the nearest hospital, which was Bacchus Hospital. And because I gave them a Groton address, they called DCF on me, saying I was homeless.
Okay. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what happened?
So 2 days after, the investigator shows up, and she's like, "Well, they have concerns that you're homeless." So I just gave birth, very tired, very still groggy, not sleeping well. And they're like, "Oh, well, they had a concern you were homeless." And I'm like, "What makes them think I'm homeless?" They're like, "You gave a Groton address." And I'm like, "What, so I can't live in one city and go to a hospital in another?" So even then, they were like, "Well, we'll talk to you when you get out of the hospital." So by the time I got out of the hospital, they made me take my 3 kids, and I had to go to a meeting, what they consider a removal meeting. In that meeting, they brought my ex, who abandoned me and my daughter, my oldest daughter. They made me leave my newborn and my 2 young children in a room with a stranger so I could have this meeting. They didn't invite my fiance, which is the father of, pretty much the psychological father of my oldest and the biological father of my 2 middle children at the time. They completely ignored him, didn't invite him. They started naming things about my mental health history that, in front of my ex, just started naming things. And I'm like, "Well, I don't know where you got that from. I didn't sign any paperwork, so where'd you get it from?" So they were using childhood issues on me. Issues from when I was a child. They were like, "Oh, well, you were abused when you were a child," and all of this. So they're like, "We give you a choice. You can take your 2 kids and move into a shelter, or we take them."
Where were you living at the time?
I was living with my brothers in Groton.
And did this meeting take place in the city you had the baby in?
Yes.
So they made you drive from your home.
They didn't even make me drive. I never even got to go home. As soon as I got out of the hospital, I had to go to this meeting.
Was this a mandatory? They said you had to go?
I had to.
What information did they give you that stated you had to be there?
The only thing is they said, you come to the meeting, we talk, or we're taking the kids. We'll go for an OTC. I didn't get nothing about my rights. I got nothing about, bring a lawyer, nothing. No explanation.
No warrant?
No.
Okay, so what happened after this meeting? Did you explain to them that you had a place to live, that you're not?
I did. I explained it to them. I was like, you know what? We'll set up a time. You come see the place for yourself.
Right.
They were not moving.
Did they take your kids?
No, I ended up, like I said, going to the shelter. And it wasn't even a closed shelter. It was all the way out in Danielson, which is like a 2-hour drive from where I live. I had no family out there, nothing.
So that's so random. They make you take your 3 kids from their home and go live in a shelter?
Yep. That was their choice, or I lose them.
That's so bizarre. I'm so
Makes no sense. It ain't the first time done it to me either.
The things that I hear and I personally have experienced with CPS, I believe it. So please don't think that I don't believe you. I totally believe you. It's just so crazy to me. I don't know why I allow things to still shock me. Okay, so after you go to that place, what happened, the shelter? How long do you have to stay there? Are you having to go to any, do you have a case plan? Like, what's going on now?
There's not even a case plan at the moment, at this point. I just had to go. The type of shelter was a single shelter, and it was a family shelter on 2 different floors. My kid's father was not allowed to come with us. He was not allowed to know where we were.
Was
nothing.
he accused of some type of abuse or anything?
No.
They just said you're not allowed to tell the father of the kid. Did they inform him?
No. According to him, he knew nothing. He found out later when he was looking for my sister to find out where I was. Apparently to him, we just vanished.
Okay, so what happened next?
So while I'm in Danielson, I have special need children. So their education, starting it and everything at an early stage is very important. So when they put me there, they're just like, oh, well, we'll come up with a plan and everything. I'm like, okay, well, so I jumped into parenting classes. I took 2 of them. I took Parents as Teachers and Triple P, which is Positive Parenting Program. I put my 2 sons, my newborn and my first son, in birth to 3, which is early childhood education, after they've been assessed. And my oldest daughter, I put her in TBCCA, which is early learners. I had to restart everything. I had to reset up their doctors, try to find a job while taking care of my kids because I had no babysitter. So I had to go on state assistance for a while I was there.
How long did you live in the shelter?
2 months.
Were you working prior to living there?
I was about to start a job.
What job was it?
A nursing assistant.
And did you have to call and tell them I can't come? What happened with that?
I told them pretty much I can't take it because of that. So instead of that, because of them, I had to not take a good paying job and go on state assistant.
And what job did you end up getting?
I didn't get a job down there yet.
Okay.
The problem is they loaded me up like with so many programs at a certain point that even finding a real job and getting around Danielson when you don't drive is very difficult. And even going to meetings like at a labor board for like job fairs Can't do that when you have 3 small kids and you have no babysitter.
So during the daytime, because I'm not sure how it works out there, but here a lot of the shelters close. Is that how it is out there?
Out here in certain shelters, the one I was at, because it was a family shelter, those with children didn't have to leave.
Okay. So what did you do during the daytime?
During the day, I still left. We came back for meals. During the day, I took them to like the library or the park, or we went out somewhere once in a while, or even outside just to the backyard.
And this whole time, you can't contact their dad?
Not at all.
So this poor baby and the other 2 are growing up or spending this time without a father.
Being forced to.
That makes perfect sense. So you're there for 2 months. You've taken 2 classes or a couple classes. You're on state assistance. What happens now? Or then?
So for them, the program that I was in at the shelter, you have to have an idea about your housing because you're only allowed to stay there for 2 months. I had an amazing case manager, luckily from the shelter, who informed me about a few programs. And one of them was DCF referral. So when I had a meeting with DCF, she came into the meeting with me and helped me demand from them a housing referral program.
And where did you go?
The housing program was through Norwich. By the time we signed all the paperwork and all of that, I ended up moving back home to New London.
And did you get to move back to your home?
Not the house I was living in, but back in my area, yes.
And at that time now, are you able to talk to your fiance?
Oh yeah, we've been together all these years.
Okay. So you got to move back home with him?
Later on, yeah.
Okay. So did your children ever get removed from your care?
Yes.
When did that happen?
So later down the road, my son, who was the newborn at the time, he was 18. Was he 18 months? No, he was 16 months by the time removal came. I just had my 4th child, which is who ended up being a product of rape. So I had 4 children by the time they were removed.
May I ask how that rape happened?
This is so weird. I met my rapist at the shelter that DCF moved me to. He was one of the single males living from the shelter. So if they never forced me to live there, I would never, yeah.
Wow. So you have 4 kids now.
Mm-hmm.
And CPS comes and takes them.
Mm-hmm.
What is their reasoning now?
So after I gave birth to my 4th child, it was a very difficult delivery. It was very traumatic. We both could have died if I didn't have her when I did. And that was the weird thing. When I got home, as soon as I got home, the caseworker that I had from the one when I lived at the shelter, she came, she saw the kids. She, did the whole normal check-in. And she goes, okay, we're closing the case. 2 weeks later, a new investigation starts.
Why?
Because I guess when I took my daughter, my newborn and my oldest, I took them for their checkup at the doctor's office. And I don't carry my car seats into the doctor's office. With that many children, I can't carry a car seat plus hold hands and
Right.
So I carried my newborn in one of those, God, what is it called? You know, the things you strap to your stomach?
Yeah.
I carried my newborn in that so I could hold my other children's hand.
Right.
So that way my hands are free, I could carry diaper bags, whatever. And I guess me going into the doctor's office like that, they didn't see a car seat with me. They called DCF with the concern that I was traveling unsafe with my newborn. And even then it was just weird because they're like, oh, well, she saw you go around the corner, down the street, and get into a green truck. I'm like, I don't own a green truck. I have a black Jeep. I even showed DCF the black Jeep. I was like, here's her car seat. Like, I have a car seat.
Yeah.
I was like, look, they all fit in the car, everything. I could barely even walk at that point from the delivery since it was such a hard delivery. You know, still bleeding out, still trying to heal mentally and physically. I was breastfeeding. I was home alone with not one, not two, but 3 toddlers and a newborn. My youngest son was down for his nap right after lunch. I just fed them lunch. My 2 oldest, you know, playing around. It was a hot day. We had fans going. Them being special needs, they weren't fully developed. So it took them a while to potty train. So I had them walking around in pull-ups and diapers. I had those little training potties all set up. The DCF worker comes in and she's like, well, they have no clothes on. I was like, it's hot. They're inside the house. They have diapers. And they have t-shirts. I was like, they're all little. They're pretty much around the same age, you know, not developed, no nothing showing.
Right.
She got mad that I put my newborn in one of those baby swings with the light blanket on. And that's because my newborn wasn't really wearing anything. And they always say your newborns get colder quicker. So she was down for a nap. They're like, oh, well, you, in her report, she said, you propped the bottle up. And I was like, she doesn't have a bottle. She's breastfed. She's like, the house is dirty. Yeah, I just fed them lunch. Kids get food on the floor. But while she's saying this, she's taking my youngest son out of his crib. She walks into his room, takes him out of his crib, hands him to me. I put him in the walker. She takes him out of the walker and puts him on the dirty floor while she's saying my floor is dirty.
When she came to the door that day, did she have a warrant to come in or an officer with her?
She didn't have a warrant. Again, I wasn't told about my rights. Nothing.
May I ask why you let her in? Was it just because you felt you had nothing to hide?
At that point, I think it was more like I was just exhausted to really even think about what I was doing at the moment. You know, like I said, wasn't sleeping well, had a new baby, was up every 2 hours, home alone, could barely walk.
Totally understandable.
So I wasn't really clicking.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, let her in, let her see the kids, she can freaking leave.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with this house.
Exactly.
And she ended up staying for 8 hours.
8 hours.
8 hours. And what she told me is because she was so concerned that I was in so much pain, she says, okay, so this is what we're going to do. She said, you allow your children to go stay with a family member for the night and go to the hospital and get checked. And then she says, and then we'll come back tomorrow. We'll check out your house, make sure it's all clean and spotless, and then we'll leave. They never did that.
What did they do?
So I did what she says. My niece came and picked up my children. She had them for the night. I packed their bags, diapers, clothes, all that. And I went to the doctor's. Now, I told the doctor, I was like, I need a full checkup. I need to make sure I'm healing correctly. And can I have the paperwork? Doctor hands me the papers. I go home. My fiance's there with my big brother. They make sure the house is spotless for DCF the following morning. I even have pictures of the house. They never came. They called us in for a meeting at their office. And by then, they handed me the papers for an OTC. And this was around 7 o'clock in the morning. Our courts open at 9. So.
Okay, so what happened? Because you said you're breastfeeding the baby. She made you put the baby with a family member also? Did you have to pump, or did they have to give the baby formula?
Luckily, I pumped. I usually always pump because I was hoping to get back to work.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get used to the whole pumping thing and making sure that I was flowing and all that.
Right.
So luckily, I did pump the night before, so I had milk to send with. But
yeah, but it
messes up the whole breastfeeding situation because they get so used to that nipple and.
Yep, I know. So, okay, what happens next? They didn't come.
They did not come. They already got the OTC paperwork.
What does OTC mean?
Order of temporary custody.
Okay, and who took the kids?
My kids were split into 4 different homes.
Okay, were they with family or foster homes?
At that moment, luckily, they were with family.
Why couldn't they be together?
Honestly, I don't know. I had a sister that was willing to take all of them at once. But DCF said she didn't pass the background check. But my sister says they never even came to her for a background check. They never contacted her.
So where did the kids end up going?
So my oldest ones went to 2 of my nieces. My youngest son, he went to my cousin. And my newborn at that time, she went to one of my sisters and my aunt. They shared custody because my sister's not from Connecticut, she's from New York.
How come Dad didn't get opportunity to take the kids?
Dad and I were living together. So I have no idea either way.
And what was there on the paperwork? And I apologize if you already mentioned this. I think you said the house was dirty. So it was
unsanitary in their eyes, the investigator's eyes.
And then
that I had postpartum depression, which I was never diagnosed with.
Okay. Don't you love when they tell you something you have, but you don't have it? Yes.
I've argued with them many times over there. I'm like, okay, well, where'd you get that information?
I'm sure. So, okay, the kids get split up. You go to court. What's next?
We actually didn't go to court until like a month later.
Were you allowed to see your kids during that month?
I had unsupervised visits. Yeah, I was able to go to the foster homes whenever.
So you mentioned they went to family, but then when did they go to foster homes?
Their family was the foster home, but they went to like actual foster homes like later down the road.
Okay, so you go to their homes and you get to see them. How often were you getting to see them?
So I was seeing my children in the beginning every day.
Okay.
I spend every day with them, as long as the foster or kinship care, whatever you want to call it, as long as they didn't care.
Right.
My fiance and I, we were bringing $300 worth of food to each of them. We were bringing clothes, we were bringing toys, so we were still supporting.
Right.
We made sure they had all of our numbers in case there was an issue. We were going to all doctor's appointments. We were making sure the kids seen each other. It got to the point, though, when everything changed when my son was injured, my youngest son. Apparently, the kinship care that they put him in, my cousin, technically, her husband, they had child abuse history. They had assault history, drug history, serious mental health issues.
How did they get the child placed with them?
Exactly. I was like, and it says in the records when I read that DCF knew about this, but they just swept it under the rug.
So they took the kids from a healthy, loving home and placed them with abusive, addict people.
Yes. They didn't even tell us these people were like this. They did nothing about it. My son, how it happened is my son started missing visitation. My fiance and I weren't able to reach the foster parents. They were missing doctor's appointments that we always went to. He wasn't seeing his siblings. I wrote emails to DCF and I was like, look, somebody needs to go check my son. You know, he's missing visits. I'm not getting any calls. They're not answering my calls. We can't bring him food.
How long was this going on for before you found out where he was or that he was okay?
It went on for 2 months, give or take.
And what were the injuries that he endured and from who?
Well, that's the thing. DCF started laughing and goes, oh, it's just family drama. This family's full of drama. I'm sure he's fine. The injuries that he ended up enduring, it was actually the DCF worker that dropped him off at my aunt's house, a different family member's house. So they took him from the ones where he was being abused. They put him in my other aunt's house. So now he's with his oldest sister and his oldest brother. So all 3 of my kids are together at that point.
Okay.
They drop him on at my oldest aunt's house, the DCF worker. And the DCF worker's like, oh, he's fine. My son lost 45% of his body weight.
How old is he at this time?
Almost 18 months.
Wow. Were they not feeding him?
They weren't feeding him. He was starving. He had 2 broken wrists, head trauma, burn marks, a few broken ribs. His hair was falling out. His skin was changing colors. And the DCF worker didn't notice this at all. I'm like, oh, he's fine. I'm like, no, he's not fine. That night, I probably looked like a mental case. I flipped out on the DCF worker completely, and I said, this is not normal. I took my son, sent my other kids into the other room, started feeding him lunch. Was it lunch? It was lunch or supper, making sure he ate. Changed his diaper, bathed him, kept records of all his injuries, and put him in his bed at the foster parents' house. And when I had to leave, I called my sister and I said, you need to go over there. They're not listening to me, but he needs to go to a doctor's. And I can't take him. They won't allow me. Someone please go. So my sister ends up going to my aunt's house and was like, he needs to go to the hospital now. They take him to the hospital. That's where the hospital diagnoses him with all the injuries. And they even said he was abused and neglected. So they ended up sending him to CCMC, which is Connecticut Children's Medical Center. And my fiance and I, we head up there as soon as we're notified that he's going. They treated us such like criminals. It was horrible. They are not good with parents at all. We had my aunt that we made take him pretty much yelling at us saying, this is all your fault. It was just horrible. I had to literally beg them to let me stay the night with him. They were like, oh no, he has hospital staff. I was like, you're gonna leave my 18-month alone and with hospital staff, strangers? He's like, oh, well, they're trained for this. So I literally had to call my attorney that I personally hired just that day to get her to allow them to let me stay. Luckily, at that moment, one of our DCF office from the head office, from the volunteer services, those people that actually sign up for the services.
Right.
Supervisors who's from the Norwich office at one point, she came to supervise the visitation. Though I was never having supervised visits before, so I could stay with him for at least that night.
How long was he in the hospital?
He ended up in the hospital for close to almost 4 months.
4 months?
So for 4 months, I'm not allowed to stay with him. He's alone in a hospital. The only visits he's getting is when I and his father were allowed to travel back and forth. So we were driving every day 2 to 3 hours back and forth just to be with him for 2 hours because they wouldn't let us stay longer than that. The look on his face every time we had to leave, it was such complete betrayal in his eyes. He had no clue. While we were there, I was the one that fed him. I was the one that spoke to the doctors. I was the one that discussed what the meal plans, what their dietary plans were, because his father knows nothing about medical. So his father let me handle it. So I'm the one that bathed him, signed all the paperwork, the one that held him when he had to get shots. It was horrible. We hated leaving. I had to go to my job after that.
What was the care that they had to give him that he needed?
So at 18 months, he was already supposed to be starting on solid foods. He went from eating solid foods to completely back to stage 1 of baby food. And even then, it was barely even that. Or it would be like the insurers, pediatricians, or that. So they really had to reteach him how to eat.
What else?
Wasn't walking yet. He had to be on oxygen for a while. They did so much blood work and CAT scans and that poor baby. Physical therapy. And that whole time, they're literally treating my husband and I like we're criminals. Like the way they're giving us looks were like, oh my God. The security was like, if you don't behave, we're gonna have to throw you out. I was like, oh my God, I can't. Can't deal with you right now. I think the only thing that kept him and I calm was being with our son, and our son needed us, and we couldn't afford to be thrown out.
Yep. So 4 months. Did the people who did this ever get in trouble?
Oh, you would not believe. They actually got let go.
I would believe it.
They got let go because Connecticut state criminal system did not feel that they deserved the highest punishment. But yet this is the same system that felt like because I was protecting my children, I deserved to lose my rights. I got a harsher punishment than she did.
Okay. 4 months. He's in the hospital. What happens next?
So after the 4 months, they finally release him. They move him into a different relative foster home. where he's staying with one of my older aunts because they wouldn't let him stay with his siblings because of his medical conditions that they caused. So they moved him with another one of my aunts, and my aunt couldn't take care of him, so he got moved again. So by then he's in his 4th home since they've taken him within those short months. 5 if you count the hospital. So they moved him with a different one of my cousins and his wife. Now, they didn't tell those people anything about his new conditions. And a few months after they had him, they gave him up. And he was moved out of relative care and into actual foster care. The foster care that they ended up putting him into was a disabled elderly couple. And when he was there, he ended up getting RSV. So he had a hard time breathing, so he ended up going back into the hospital. He ended up getting injured there.
How did he get injured?
He slipped off the deck and fell into their pool. At least that's the story I was told.
How old was he then?
Around 2 years old.
He can't swim.
No. And they couldn't even take care of him because they could barely walk. They were elderly and had disabilities of their own.
Who got him out of the pool?
That I don't know. They never told me any of the details. And the thing about that is his injuries did not add up to a pool injury.
What did they add up to in your mind?
Because he had scratches, like from wood. He had a few bangs that made no sense for hitting inside the pool. He didn't swallow any water, which if you were in a pool, most likely you would swallow water.
Right.
So there's no water in his lungs. There was none of that. But he was unconscious. So I'm like, that makes no sense to me.
He was unconscious for how long?
When I was told, he was already unconscious for a few hours.
Hours?
When I was told, yeah.
So he's in the hospital and you get called by who?
DCF.
Hey, your son's in the hospital.
Yeah. Not even details of why he's in the hospital. They're like, we'll meet you at CCMC.
So you raced over there?
So I raced over there. They still weren't the ones that told me. It was actually the doctors that told me.
Was he still unconscious?
By the time I got there, he was out for maybe another hour, but he woke up soon after.
How long did he stay in the hospital that time?
That time it was another 2 months.
What was the care?
And then he went back to that home afterwards.
Back to that home. Did they even come to the hospital to see him?
No. The only ones that came to the hospital to see him at that point were me and his father. And maybe a DCF worker here and there.
Isn't that part of the foster parent's job?
You would have. I have no idea. I would be thinking.
So he leaves the home and leaves the hospital, goes back to that home. You have no say.
No say.
How long is he there for?
He ended up staying there for a little while. Now, as I told you before, a different one of my cousins had him, but they couldn't handle his medical condition, so they gave him up, and that's why he was in the home in the first place. So it turns out DCF was encouraging the foster home where he was injured the second time to interact with those foster parents again to put him back in the home. So they took him back.
Okay.
No, that's not the other time they give him up. They give him up one time after that again. So they give him up. He gets injured and almost killed again. Gets brought back to that same home. They take him back.
How did that, wait. How did he get injured again?
The almost drowning so-called incident.
Okay.
Yeah. So they took him back again after that.
Okay.
Is what I'm saying. And we again have no say. So at that point, I speak to DCF and I'm like, I want a meeting with their foster parents. I want a meeting. Because clearly you're not answering my questions. The kids' attorneys aren't doing anything.
Right.
They're not questioning anything. They haven't seen them. So all these months, my kids aren't even seeing their attorney. So they're like, oh, well, and I'm like, I want that meeting. So it got to the point where his father and I literally had to demand the meeting. As soon as the meeting was happening, DCF was like, oh, you need to be nice. They're your cousins. We'll end this meeting. And I said, I don't care if they're my cousins. I don't care. My cousin and I had no prior relationship whatsoever. And I was like, do you guys even do background checks on these people? DCF's like, what do you mean? I was like, his daughter killed herself on drugs.
This is the same cousins that abused your son?
No.
Okay.
This is enough of that.
Okay.
So the ones that they were with, the first time was on my mother's side, even though these ones are on my mom's side, but it's through their sister. My family's too big.
Just to pause. What's going on with you during this whole time? What's your case plan? Are they giving you
during this whole time, their father and I is ordered to do a psychological eval.
Okay.
We are supposed to continue with our services. I'm still working as a state caregiver where I have no neglect charges, nothing. I'm taking all these classes, and it's running through my head. I'm like, well, you said he has medical issues. Why not let him come home? I'm medically trained. I handle medical complex cases every day.
Right.
I'm like, but you're giving me issues. I was like, how's the same state that allows me to be a state caregiver can't let me have my own kids?
Right. So does not make sense.
And then the DCF's arguing with me. They're like, being a state caregiver is not the same as taking care of your own kids. And I said, pretty much. I said, I'm changing diapers.
Yeah.
I'm feeding them. I'm clothing them. I'm supervising them, but apparently I don't have proper supervision. I was like, I'm paying attention to details. And I'm like, I'm the one that noticed he was abused in the first place. You didn't.
Right. So did you ever have a date to get your kids back?
We have filed motions over the years to get them back, to take away everything. And the judge never even listened to the motion. He completely ignored our motions every time we filed.
Do you have your kids back now?
No. And now I'm in federal court fighting for them.
All 4?
All 5. There's 5.
When did the 5th one get taken?
The 5th one was taken from me straight out of the hospital. Yeah, she never got to come home.
What was their reasoning for that one?
Because they claimed predictive neglect, because while I was pregnant with her, I refused to take medication, which one of the side effects could have ended up her being born with underdeveloped lungs. And it could have ended up in my breast milk and caused her more issues. So I refused to take medication that was making me aggressive.
What was the medication for?
Zoloft. It was supposed to be for anxiety.
Okay.
Though At that point, though, they kept changing my diagnosis. And I would ask them, I'll be like, well, what am I taking the medication for? And when the medicine was described, my step was only to be med evaluated. My therapist at that time says, I don't feel you really need medication. And I said, but DCF wants me on medication.
Did you ever have the psych evaluation?
I've had 2.
And
I've had 3 psych evals and 1 neurological eval.
And what did they come back as?
So the first psych eval they did, let me explain this better. So when they first took my kids, I had a personal psych eval done by my own therapist. The first psych eval came back that I was very clear-headed no matter what, in all lights of what I was going through. That I was able to make judgment calls, that I was sound of mind, if you will.
Right.
So after my son was hurt, they ordered my fiance and I to take one through their court-ordered psychologist. That guy was confusing because if you read the paperwork, it looks like he was reaching. He used the fact that I wasn't wearing makeup the day that I came in there, that against me. He talked about my clothes. He talked about the way I spoke.
What about the way you speak?
Because the way I speak, according to him, is very uneducated. When all this was happening, I had like a southern draw to it. My dad's from Dallas. I have like a southern draw. I did have an IEP in high school. So he was pretty much just making fun of the way I look and the way I speak. And that's within 10 minutes of walking through the door.
Wow. Amazing. Was this a CPS chosen person?
It was the court chosen one, yes.
There we go.
So right before that, the funny thing is right before that, I did meet with the CPS one, and there was no recommendations. So this is all coming from the court one. Again, like we said, this was right after my son's injuries, right after he got out of the hospital, we were forced to take this. We had a parent interaction one with the children. So not only are you making me go through this, but you're bringing my son in who just got out of the hospital. You're dragging him into it. And yeah, he liked seeing with his siblings, he was just hurt by a female. So he was kind of edgy, very untrusting of females.
I'm sure.
They're like, oh, well, he doesn't seem to be bonding with you. And I'm like, well, let me think about that. Every time I had to leave, he had a look of betrayal. So he probably was like, why are you leaving me?
Right.
He was abused by a female. No one helped him. So yeah, he's going to lean more towards his father. We bought food for the kids. That was used against us because we had to stay there for like 4 hours with the kids. I'm not going to make my kids, who are very young, sit there without something to snack on.
Why was that against you?
You'd be surprised what was used against me. Maybe not, actually.
But for bringing them food, that would be a responsible thing to do.
According to the psychologist, no.
What did he say was wrong with it, though?
His whole thing was it was supposed to be about my interaction with the children, not about, I don't know, he was like saying how feeding them and stuff was taking away from the purpose, and I don't know. It was, but he made us do a test on the computer. We had to do a questionnaire. And some of the questions were like, have you been feeling depressed lately? my response was, can you not see what I'm going through?
Yeah.
I was like, my son was almost killed. Do you feel like you can't trust people? Yes. So I got diagnosed with paranoia for that. I'm paranoid because of that, but okay.
Well, who wouldn't be, though?
Your kids are out of your sight, and every time they're out of your sight, they're almost hurt or killed. Yeah, you'd be paranoid too.
Exactly.
So I'm a very angry individual, apparently. Again, in my eyes, that's reasonable.
Yeah. You've been betrayed.
They did the ink blot test. You know, when you're looking at ink blots and they're like, what do you see?
Okay.
And when he first did it, I was like, I don't see anything. What am I supposed to be seeing? I was like, it's an ink blot. What am I supposed to be seeing?
Right.
I was like, I don't see anything. He's like, you have to see something. I was like, but I don't see anything. He's like, you have to see something. So I was like, okay, I see this. Yeah. Then they did, they asked about,
What was wrong with what you saw?
I don't have the ink blots in front of me. I can't explain it, but like one of them looked like a crab. So I was like, oh, it looks like a crab, or it looks like a mask, or it looks like a ballerina, or, you know, something like that.
Is there like a pass?
And then they make you point it out afterwards, like where you see it. And
is it a fail type thing?
Huh?
Is it a pass or fail type of test?
With that test, I guess there's only, according to the test or something, you can only see two different things. And if you don't see something, like one of those two different things, like it leads you down to a whole, I don't know. Apparently what you see, it leads you down to a path about your personality, or I'm not a therapist, I don't know.
Wow, that's insane.
But then he pulled me into the room, and while we're in the room, he's like, I see you had a hard childhood and everything. And I was like, well, yeah. And he goes, so tell me about everything. He brings up my rapist, and I goes, yeah, I was raped. Later confined in his report, he checked into the rape, and the rape was confirmed that it was non-consensual. That the rape did happen, apparently, you know. He checked into it. It was confirmed. So again, he's just like speaking to me. He's like asking my exes about our relationships. Again, I don't know what my relationships or my sexual life as a human being has to do with my parenting.
Right.
But okay. So he asks, my oldest is biological father. He got pulled in too. My ex, how some ex do, they like to lie and say, I haven't seen my kid because she wouldn't let me. She moved out of state.
No.
When they asked me about him, I was like, yeah, I moved out of state. I had full custody. He didn't fight me for custody. I had full custody. I had full legal, and I could leave. I don't have to tell him.
Right.
I was like, he wanted to give up his rights. He wasn't supporting her. Again, I didn't have to tell him.
Yeah.
She never knew him. I showed him letters. I showed the psychiatrist letters where I am writing my ex, asking him to come see our daughter. Asking him to spend time. I tried that for 13 months. With no response after 13 months. And the only thing when we do talk, all he was talking about is, why don't you come back to me? And never asked about her. So the psychiatrist says, okay, so apparently you were telling the truth. You know, he can't be taken seriously. He has commitment issues. His only excuse, the only thing my ex had to really say bad about me was like, I was always accusing him of cheating, and, you know, the real childish.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I wouldn't let her see the kid unsupervised if I had custody because she left state. Yeah, I was able to leave state. I had full custody.
Right.
It's like, you weren't being a father. She grew up with my fiance as dad since she was 9 months old.
Yeah.
She don't know you.
Right.
He ended up giving up his rights, but so that whole time he brought in my fiance. My fiance's sitting there telling him, you know, we never fight, we have no domestic violence against us. I don't throw things, he doesn't throw things. Yeah, once in a while I will call him stupid because he acts stupid.
Yeah.
And he admits it.
Yeah. Good.
And by the way, me calling him stupid is apparently abuse.
Really?
Even if I'm saying it while laughing, like, stop acting stupid.
Good to know. Thank you for telling me.
Apparently that's abuse, just so you know.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And we never argue in front of our children.
Good for you.
And though the provider was like, oh, they were arguing, she was calling him stupid, she was telling him what to do. My fiance has ADHD and has impulsive control issues. So he gets very distracted. He gets very distracted. So yeah, once in a while, I'll have to be like, hey, can you go change a diaper?
What's wrong with that?
Apparently it's very bad in the eyes of DCF.
But you're
or I'll tell him, you know, I'm busy helping Gabby with homework. Can you please go take Mason to the bathroom or whatever? Yep, that's abusive too.
So no communicating in a relationship is what they're saying.
Oh, no, we were ordered to take co-parenting classes and couple therapy.
How did that help?
We took it for a day and we actually ended up arguing after that.
But
and he's like, I don't want to go back there. It didn't do us any good.
Yeah.
It made us fight. It's awkward.
Yeah. Right.
You know, if something's not broke, don't fix it. And kind of
right.
Let it go.
Get it.
And we've always been like that. So going through this test, you know, he's checking my kids. My kids are being called mental retarded by this psychologist.
Wow.
My oldest, yeah, she has a speech delay. She's in 4th grade now, but she's doing 6th grade science. She's very smart.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has a delay in speech, but that's it. She was marked mentally retarded by the psychiatrist. My 2 oldest now are, I think the report said, depression and anxiety. You would be 2 if all 5 of my kids have been moved into 9 different homes. I've had to meet every single one. Well, I didn't have to. I demanded to meet every single one of those foster parents. Even when my second daughter got put with my rapist and his mother, I demanded to meet her. And I will tell you, that is one of the most awkward conversations ever.
Tell me about it.
So trying to meet her, I had to put my feelings for her son aside. She took a look at a picture of my second son who was born before my daughter that they claim is his, my rapist is. And she's like, oh, is that my grandson? I said, no, that's not your grandson. Because my daughter that they're claiming is his looks just like my youngest son.
Hold on. Explain that again. Your daughter that...
All right, so you know how I told you I was raped and I had
right.
So my son that was born before that, the one that was injured,
right,
looks exactly like my daughter that they were claiming belongs to my rapist. They look like they're twins. So my rapist's mother tried to claim that my son was her grandson.
I apologize. When did the child get put with the rapist's parents? How did that happen?
Even that was hard because So a few months after they took my kids, going back, they started looking for my rapist after I mentioned that I was raped. So after the psych eval, with the possibility of my rapist being the father of my daughter. My second daughter, not my third daughter, but he didn't respond to them. They put my information out in newspapers. They put it out in the media. Yeah, confidentiality does not exist.
As in, hey, if you...
You know, we took her kid. We are looking for a possible father with his name. Yeah.
Wow. And did it say anything about rape, or did it just say if you slept
I
with...
have no idea. I didn't read the article. I just know that that's how they did it because that was in the paperwork.
Okay.
So he didn't respond for months. So the judge says, you know what? Excuse my language, fuck him. He defaulted. It was after he defaulted did they bring him in. So they weren't even supposed to be looking for him after the default. They did a DNA test on him and my fiance. They said that my fiance wasn't the father, though doing research, the thrush that my daughter had in her mouth can manipulate the genes. But anyway, my fiance is not the father because she's white, and he's more Hispanic and Asian.
Okay.
She looks white. So they said my rapist was the father when they did the DNA test. And according to that, is because she's related to 99.9% all white males.
That's weird.
Yeah, that's what this example it said. Most likely the father because she's 99.9% related to all white males. I was like, you know, that's pretty much just saying any fucking white male could be her daddy.
Yeah.
I was like, that is such a weird thing. And I'm like, let's not even take the fact that I'm white.
Yeah.
I'm full white.
Right.
And I try to argue with them. I'm like, well, shouldn't we do that again? And this time I volunteer my DNA sample, so you're not mixing his DNA with mine. Who's to say she didn't get that strand from me?
Right.
And they're like, oh, that's not necessary. They refused to give me a copy of the DNA test. They refused to let me see it. Comes to turn out, once I became my own attorney, that they did 2 DNA tests on him, and he's not the father. According to state's own evidence, yes.
The man who raped you?
Yeah, he's not the father according to state's own evidence.
But is he?
Not according to state's evidence, no.
So who does she belong to?
I had her by myself.
Yeah, the Virgin Mary.
Apparently, because apparently my fiance is not the father, and apparently he's not the father according to state's evidence. So apparently I had her by myself.
Okay, so how did she get to his parents' house?
Because when I wasn't allowed, before I wasn't allowed to see the DNA test, the judge took the rights from my fiance without even giving him a trial for her and gave them to him.
Without him being the dad?
According to state's evidence, he's not the dad.
So here's this random male, here's a child.
Pretty much, because they gave him a paper that says, like I explained to you, that she's most likely his because she's related to 99.9% all white males. So I'm pretty like, now I'm looking, I'm like, okay, so just any random white male could come off the street and take my baby. And I was like, Judge, that even means you. That's horrible, but I try not to,
Wow.
So there was a lot of stereotyping, and I'm like, so they gave him rights to my daughter. They took him from my fiance, who's been her dad this whole time.
Yeah.
Who signed all the paperwork, who accepts her, and she's 2 years old at this time, so he's been her father her whole life. And you don't even give him a trial for it. You just take his rights, hand him to another male who I later find out later is not even the father, and he has sole custody of her. Then I also find out they filed fake police reports against my fiance and I. We were never charged. They filed fake police reports. Because when I found out they were allowing my daughter to see my rapist, they were providing to us the same provider for visitation. And I was like, conflict of interest. The attorney they gave him was the same attorney for the woman that abused my son in criminal court. So again, I claimed bias on that. The judge didn't want to hear it. The judge said it's not biased. Now conflict of interest.
Right.
And I told them, now the provider they gave me, I hate saying it this way, she was 22, no children of her own, and no experience with children besides babysitting.
And when you say provider, can you explain what that means?
Provider for the visit, so our supervisor.
Okay.
Our parent educator, whatever the term would be. The one that they said would have to teach us how to be a parent. Wasn't even a parent herself. The only experience she had with children was babysitting. And she was so much younger than us. So her and I used to get into these arguments because I would ask her, I'd be like, have you ever had children yourself? Because parenting one child is different than parenting 5.
Right.
And I was like, you got to understand that I can't keep my eye on one child the whole time.
Right.
My attention has to be split.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, with my fiance, we honestly have to split our time. We can't be in the same room or interact like that. If I need him help with something, he needs to do it.
Right.
So at first, it would be we would have 4 hours a week with the kids. No, we would have 2 days, 4 hours a week each. So 8 hours total a week. Because they took away our visits in the home unsupervised because the foster parents pretty much were having a witch hunt against us. Making up lies and...
Right.
So they moved it to that. We would start our visits off the same because by the time my kids would come, especially my oldest 2, it'd be right after school. As soon as they would come, I would cook. I always brought dinner, fruit, snack, try to cover all the food groups. I took a nutrition course.
Wow.
I would make them eat dinner. After dinner, we would do homework and play games, or if it was the holidays, make gingerbread houses, open presents, celebrate birthdays, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
We'd play. My kids love to dance, so we'd dance with them. My kids like art, so I would always have an arts and craft project, and arts and crafts can be very therapeutic.
Yeah.
So we would do that. And before they left, there was a shower there, so I would bathe them. I'd bathe them, put them in their pajamas. I would brush their teeth.
Yeah.
Put their jackets on, walk them out to the car for the foster parents to pick up. So the foster parents wouldn't really have to do anything. Just put them to bed.
Right.
I would send them home with letters for the foster parents, pretty much telling them, what they did today, how much they ate. I would address concerning issues if there were any. We've had notebooks. We would balance back and forth. So that went on for a while. The provider, or again, educator, whatever term people want to use, when I found out that she was dealing with my rapist, she claimed that I flipped out, that I said, this isn't right. The children were scared. She texted my DCF worker. She was writing the foster parents, claiming that I wouldn't allow the kids to have the snack that they brought, only what I brought. So she was down-mouthing me to DCF and the foster parents the entire time, according to the evidence that was submitted in trial. I didn't even know about this at the time. She filed fake police reports. I record every single one of my visits with my kids. So the day she's claiming she filed the police reports, I have videos that I wasn't acting the way she says I was acting. She didn't press charges. She didn't ask to be taken off the case. But yet we lost our visits and we got moved into the DCF office. And we lost hours with our kids. They took away a day. So we were only allowed 2 hours with our kids a week.
2 hours? Did you have your kids all at once or one at a time?
All at once. So that would count as their sibling visits as well. So we got moved to the DCF office with security guards, and the toys were broken and furniture was broken. There was barely any toys.
Dirty.
It's disgusting.
Yeah.
We did the best we could.
Right.
My fiance and I, we decorated for, again, birthdays, holidays. We brought a Christmas tree in to celebrate Christmas with them. We hung up stockings. We'd always show up half an hour to an hour early to set up the room. My children on their birthdays are always like, why can't you just come to my normal birthday party? And I was like, can't tell them the truth.
Right.
No, we're not allowed. So I said, this is your VIP party. My oldest turned to the TCF worker and goes, then why are you here? As hard as that is, I want to laugh and I couldn't.
I bet.
I was like, she don't like you neither.
Yeah. So, okay. Do you still have visits?
No.
How did you lose everything? What happened?
So, it just kept going downhill. I mean, after they filed those fake police reports, my son who was injured, his attorney, again, I remind you guys, their attorneys never really even seen us with our kids.
Right.
They never came to visit. They had never came to my home. Nothing. Everything they were going off of was DCF reports or these providers. So after they filed those fake police reports, we ended up having to go to court. My son's attorney filed a motion to cancel our visitation with him, not because of the way he was acting at visits. She admits that he loved seeing me, that he loved seeing his father, that he loved seeing his siblings, and he's happy. But when he got back to the foster home, the foster parent reported that he was zombified. Like, he wouldn't interact with them at all. He wouldn't smile. He wouldn't do nothing. He was 3 years old, and because of what she reported out of our care when we're not around, we lost the visits. My attorney, I hired my attorney. I was the only parent that chose and paid for a hired attorney. I didn't have a court-appointed attorney. And she fought the judge for a hearing. She goes, let's have a hearing. Let's see this evidence that they're claiming.
Right.
The judge said no. So he granted the suspension without even seeing proof that it was really happening. So that son we haven't seen in 3 years.
At all.
At all. So we were having visits with the other 4. You know, I didn't even get told. I didn't get no papers in the mail or anything. I waited. It was close to his birthday. I had it all set up just to be told by DCF worker that I wouldn't be seeing my son again. Nothing. She's like, if you cry, we can shut this visit down. I'm like, are you kidding me?
This is your last visit with him?
We never had a last visit with him. We got told on his birthday that we wouldn't be seeing. So we went, you know, we did the best we could. My attorney's like, you know, we might have lost that. We still have trial, you know, keep doing what you're doing.
Now,
Try to stay positive.
What about the other 4?
So we were seeing the other 4. Now, with the other 4, it wasn't even their attorney that filed. Their attorneys filed no emotions besides to take away my visits with my son. That's the only motion ever filed by these attorneys. It was actually my attorney and me that filed for my kids to be allowed to see each other. I filed for sibling visitations outside of the visits because I felt if I couldn't see my son, at least his siblings should see him.
Agreed.
I was like, they shouldn't be punished, even though I know I shouldn't have been punished either, but.
Right.
So we filed for those. We were granted those, thank God. So he was seeing his children, he was seeing his siblings, but that had to do with all foster care. But so fast forwarding through all this, you know, my oldest son, my oldest daughter, they had to go through surgery.
For what?
My oldest daughter, according to DCF reports, she was punched in the mouth. And it killed one of her teeth, which would have caused an infection if she didn't have surgery.
Did you get to be there for that?
I got to be there for that.
Punched her in the mouth.
I don't know. My kids have so many injury reports that I have no clue. You had my newborn baby, the one I had that they took right out of the hospital, fall down a set of stairs at the foster home at the age of 6 months old.
How is a 6-month-old
fall down a set of stairs?
Right.
The foster parent goes, oh, well, my daughter left the gate open. I was like, that still don't make sense.
Yeah, she barely crawling at that age?
She was barely crawling. So none of their reports made sense. And the DCF worker didn't like it because when it came to those injuries, the doctors started to pick up on it, that the kids weren't in my care. So when the DCF workers would demand something or the foster parents, the doctors would say no. And then they would turn to me and was like, is this okay? Here's the paperwork. Here's the proof. Can you sign off on this? DCF would be so mad. They're like, we have custody. We're like, we're not talking to you. They would always go to me and the father. They're like, you're going to need these.
So do you still have visits with the other 4?
No, I haven't seen my other 4 in 2 years.
So it's been, you said 4 years for the one son?
For that son, it's been 3 years. For my other 4, it's been 2 years.
And no visits, nothing?
I've reached out, nothing.
Is it because you're not allowed or because CPS said that's it?
I honestly have no idea.
Have your parental rights been completely removed?
Mm-hmm.
Do you get pictures or get to know how they're doing?
No.
Have they been adopted?
Even that, I don't know.
So what's going on in your trial right now? What are you fighting for?
So now going through everything. We've already done the TPR trial, so now we're in federal court. I'm brought up, violations of due process, because during the trial, we were not allowed to compare the care that my kids went through out of my care to the care that we weren't even allowed to speak about my kids' injuries. We were not allowed to present evidence of those. Nothing. The judge denied it all. I was not allowed to show proof of my rape, but which was actually, convicted and all. But yet DCF was allowed to submit reports on false police reports where they didn't file charges, nothing. We never went to court. There was no trial, no nothing on those. I was never convicted. They harassed me about my rape. They made me go into details about my rape, the smell and everything, in a room full of male attorneys. My attorney fought that. She was like, this is not appropriate. It has nothing to do with what kind of parent she is.
Is that daughter still with his parents?
Yeah, he has full legal custody. He's the full legal parent. Actually, it was that day after they made me talk about my rape and everything in detail that they gave him legal custody of my daughter. And I was supposed to be allowed to see her supervised. And I set up all supervised visitation and everything, and he never responded. But yet the judge goes, oh, he didn't try to come between you and your daughter. I was like, I have proof.
Does the dad of the first child get to see her?
No, he gave up his rights willingly.
Are any of the siblings together that you're aware of?
Last time I know, 2 of my oldest 2 were together.
So what is the goal you're hoping to get out of the trial?
So this federal court case, I am fighting for complete turnaround. I don't even want money, but the judge says to file the case, I have to fight for money as well. I don't even want it.
How long could it take?
That I have no idea, but I'm fighting for a complete turnaround. Full reinstatement of parental rights. Any adoptions turned over. I put that in there because I have no clue. I asked for all their identities to be changed back if they've been changed. I asked for new social security numbers because their social security number's been passed from one place to one place to one place.
Yeah.
So identity theft I was worried about. I asked for the attorneys to finally be held accountable. And I said, rather that be that they pay the sum that I'm asking, even though I really don't want it, but that money could go towards the children.
Yeah.
Or their license be taken for the state of Connecticut. I don't even care. Like, they can't practice in the state of Connecticut anymore.
Good.
I even wrote up a proposal to make sure this doesn't happen again for any other family. I call it the GMDLZ proposal, and it's because it's named after my children. I said, either that or the money that they give me could go towards that. It'd be my own, give back.
Good.
So there was a lot that I asked, and be reasonable. I understand that. I was thinking to my fiance, I'm like, they haven't seen us in a while, and, it's not their fault. So if we take them back completely and cut where they are, those people out of their lives, they're going to be feeling the loss all over again.
Right.
And I was like, I hate these people for what they did to me. But for my kids' sake, I wrote up a court agreement plan, if you will, saying that I will allow them visitations with my children and a certain guidelines. But I want full custody. I want them living at home with me. They can call my children. They can visit my children. We could work on having like a relationship in there for the best interest of them. The incident with my rapist and his mom, I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that.
Right.
I asked for his rights to be completely terminated.
Agreed.
But if I can't have that,
right,
he could have visits with my daughter, but they're supervised. I asked for complete medical evaluations when they come home, because I've heard horror stories about foster care.
Yeah, abuse.
If my son is adopted, the one that was injured, he got adopted by his abuser. I brought into my court case, the federal court case, I said, this is the thing. The state they took my rights. I'm the state legal caregiver. I got a reward from our state senate for all the, a general citation, if you will. I think that's what it's called, from the General Assembly, for all the work I have done in Connecticut for Connecticut's children. I have mental health training. I have all of that, all these certifications. But I'm not fit to parent. You stole my rights. His actual abuser, you let adopt him and you let her go because you didn't want to hold her accountable. You didn't feel she deserved a harsher punishment. Then you gave me full custody of my handicapped brother who has a mindset the same age as my daughter. I'm like, none of these report. Plus, we're still paying child support. You used against me the fact that I willingly supported my children. That was used against me. I bought my kids things. I bought them food. I bought them clothes. I made sure they had all they had. That was used against me by the kids' attorneys. They're like, who made you do that? I said, I'm a mother. I don't have to be made to do that.
Are you still paying child support?
We're still paying child support.
So let me ask you, what information or what would you say to any parent who's going through this?
To be honest, it's hell. I explained to a lot of people it's worse than death for a parent. Grieving alive children, not knowing if they're okay.
Right.
It's a complete horror story. There's days I can't get out of bed. There's days that just worse, especially on their holidays, birthdays. The only reason I don't give up is for them. I give up, they won't come home.
Right.
I keep fighting, there's a chance. And even if they don't, God forbid, at least there's a trail saying, my mom fought for me. She didn't abandon me. So,
Well, Kirsten, your story's incredible and it's not over yet.
Not yet.
I want to keep in touch. I want to know how it goes. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate.
No problem.